This is Greg Pass with the Americans in Wartime Experience. Today's date is July 18th, 2022, and I have the privilege to speak through the magic of Zoom with Terry Fraser. Terry, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And Terry, where are you from? Where are you at right now?
I'm in Las Vegas right now.
Okay, gotcha. So tell us your full name and where you were born.
So my name is Teresa Fraser, and I was born in Maine a long time ago, 1965. And I decided to join the military because my dad was a Korean War vet. And I thought, I really want to serve my country like he did. So my parents didn't really want me to, but I just kind of went rogue and I went to MEPS and I signed up. Didn't even tell them.
Any other military vets in your family?
No.
So you didn't tell them when they found out. What did they say?
My dad was thrilled, son he never had. And my mom was like crying and saying, why can't you just be a secretary?
Yeah. And what branch and what MOS?
I went in the Air Force and I was a crew chief on T-38s to start. So tactical fighter trainer.
Gotcha. Why did you pick the Air Force?
I think the Air Force picked me. I went down to the MEP station and that's who happened to be in the office at the time. It's really haphazard. The whole thing is just one stumble after another. Long story short, my boyfriend at the time was going to join and not tell me. And I found out. So I went down and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to join. And you won't know that I'm leaving too. And I left the day before he did. So he kind of guided those steps. Yeah, well, a little bit, just a little bit. But I didn't want to be in Maine for the rest of my life. I love Maine. It's beautiful, but I wanted to see the world. I wanted to see what was out there. And this was a really great way to do it.
Yeah. So your MOS, were you given an opportunity, the recruiter, to select what you wanted to do, or was it kind of they rolled the dice?
So I took the ASVAB and I went in open mechanics because that's what I scored the highest on the ASVAB.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell us where you went to basic training and then your advanced training, where that was and what did that entail?
So I went to Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and you do basic training for 6 weeks there. And then when you're done there, they let you select your job and you have to lift 75 pounds to get the aircraft mechanics job. And I did. You have to put it over your head. And then after you get out of basic, they send you to a tech school. And I got to go to Shepherd Air Force Base, which is also in Texas, and train on basically tactical fighter aircraft. So they shunt you off once you become a crew chief. They say, okay, you're either going to train on heavies, fighters, or cargo. And I got fighters.
Is that what you wanted?
I didn't know at the time, but I'm really glad that's what I got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So when you're working on these aircraft, what are there different models that you're working on, or just one specific?
So the first jet they assigned me to was the T-38A, which was stationed out of Williams Air Force Base in Phoenix. And that was a blast. It's a great jet to start on as a young airman. It's easy to work on. You learn everything you need to know to learn all the other fighter aircraft. And then you can go anywhere from there. And this is back when the Air Force, like I said, they shunted you into these different channels. If you started off on, T-38s and you were going to do fighters for the rest of your career, and you had to cross train to get into heavies. You had to cross train to get into other things. So I stayed on that. And then I ended up going from that to Germany. And I actually worked on F-4G Wild Weasels in Germany. So it's quite a different airframe, much bigger, a lot more going on. You got weapons, tanks. That's not something you see on a 38. Yeah. So I had to really kind of play catch up really fast to learn that next airframe.
I may have asked this already, but I don't recall. What year was it you went through your training?
I left Maine in 1984.
Okay. So then Germany would have been
89, 90.
89 and 90. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we were there barely like 6 months before the Gulf kicked off.
Okay. So do you remember hearing about when Iraq invaded Kuwait?
We were at Berncastle Wine Fest, so we weren't really thinking about news. And over there, you only get AFN, which is Air Force News Channel. So we hadn't really heard about it yet. We were working all the time. You're either at work or you're asleep. And we were at the wine fest, we came home, went to bed, and then they were banging on our door because of recall. They had called our house phone, but we hadn't gotten home yet. And then they went around and started getting everybody, physically getting everyone. And I can't tell you when that, it was like August, some mid-August date.
Mhm.
And once we got recalled, then that's when everybody started saying, hey, did you know that Iraq invaded Kuwait? And then we all got the news on and we watched it and we found out. So
Were you very familiar with Kuwait at that point, or were you like, hey, what the heck, where the heck is that?
had no clue, had to look at a map, had no
Mhm.
idea.
So what, when you say you're recalled, that was not, at that point, you weren't sure you were going, or was it basically an alert at that point, or what was the?
So a recall is when they need you to go and generate aircraft to get ready for something. And, you know, the Air Force will tell you how many they need. And then you just generate all those aircraft, you get the tanks on them, you fill them up, you make sure they don't leak and that the plane's running good. And then the pilots get in them and sit and wait to be told where they're going to go.
Yeah.
So we had to gen up like the entire, we had 3 squadrons on Spang of just F4s at the time. So each AMU had to generate all of their jets. Because
AMU.
if some of them don't work, you got to take one that works from, you know, and put it in place of one that doesn't.
AMU, what is that?
Aircraft maintenance unit.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the F4. What kind of aircraft is it? What's the crew? What's the capabilities of that on that?
So ours were F4G Wild Weasel. So those are 2-seaters, and the guy in the back does all the bombing and weapons and targeting, and the guy in the front does all the driving. And they're old. They're very old planes. So consider that they were in the Vietnam War, and
Mhm.
we're still using them in 1989 and 90. Today, there are no F4s still flying at all. The last one that was an air show bird, it flew its last mission like 2 or 3 years ago, and then they parked it, and I think it's a static display somewhere.
Gotcha.
So they're all out of the air now, unless they belong to the Israeli Air Force or some other nation that we sold our old planes to, because we do that a lot.
Mhm. So what kind of missions will an F4 go on? Is it, this is not a like air-to-air aircraft, is it? Like a fighter
No,
aircraft?
no, they don't have a gun. They do have a couple of smaller missiles. The AIM-9 is underneath the right side, and you can shoot that at a plane if you want to. That'd be his only defense, and he only gets one.
Mhm.
The missiles that we carried on the F4 Wild Weasel were the 2 harm missiles under the wings, and those are the ones that go down and shoot the SAM sites on the ground. So we don't
Gotcha.
do that by ourselves. The F-16s that were at our base, they're the hunter. They go in and waggle their tail in front of the SAMs to get them to pop up. And when the SAMs pop up, we're the killer, and we come in and we shoot the harms, and we get everything we aim at. We got all the SAM sites. That's why we won the Iraq War. There was no air defenses left on the ground when we got done with them.
So at what point in time did you know that you're actually, your unit was going to be involved in a conflict? So you're on alert, you get everything ready, and then what time, at what point do you deploy or find out you're going to be deploying?
Well, we came in and we generated, and after like 12 hours of that, they called us all into the break room and they said, okay, here's what's going on. And at that point, I'm the only girl in the unit. And I said, are they going to allow us to go, women to go? And he says, I'm pretty sure. And I said, okay. And I was asking if I could go, and nobody said I couldn't. And then there was a few other girls that were specialists in our AMU, like they do electrician stuff or hydraulics or stuff like that. So I think we had like 5 girls go, and then the rest were all guys.
Mhm.
And pretty quick after we generated, they said, yeah, we're going, we're sending this many jets, we're sending this many people. Here's the list of who's going. And I was on the list and my husband wasn't, because my husband was also in the same squadron as I was. And he and I were looking at each other like, uh-oh, I'm going and you're not. You know, he was kind of freaked out about that. I was freaked out too, just
Did you-
because we had no idea what we were getting into.
Did you have kids?
No,
Okay. So how old were you at the time?
I was 28 and he was 31.
And what was your rank?
I was a buck sergeant.
Okay. So is that an E5 and
E4.
E4?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you get your marching orders, but your husband, he's staying back in Germany.
He had to stay in Germany.
Okay.
Mhm.
So what's next? What do you guys have to do to get ready for deployment when you have aircraft like that? What does that entail?
So after we got the planes ready, then they had to get us ready. And so I had to go through the shot line and get my bags ready. And they had to give me my chem gear, my M16, which we had to field strip, put back together and stick back in the tin foil. I never saw my gun again, by the way. We're working on an airplane. We don't have room for a gun. You can't stick it over your shoulder. It's a FOD hazard. It's probably a shoot yourself hazard too. So they took our guns away and they said, if we need you to have these, we'll give them back. And I was like, cool, because I don't really like guns. But I shot it once and that was enough for me. I was good. So we go through these lines and you get all your shots, and you had to get yellow fever. Shoot, I'm going to forget them because it's been like 30 years. There was one that you had to get, and it was a really thick, they call it a jello shot, and you couldn't get it in your arm. You had to get it in your butt or your hip because it's just that thick, and they wanted it to go in and be in deep muscle. So everybody's having to pull their pants down, and guys are fainting left and right because it hurts. It hurts a lot. I had to get like 5 different shots. Anthrax, had to get anthrax, yellow fever. God, I can't remember. Gamma globulin. Gamma globulin is the jello shot. Yeah.
So
that was fun.
so where were you heading, and how did you get there?
So we weren't told. No one told us anything about where we were going. They said you're going to the Persian Gulf. That's all they said. And we got on a KC-10, and we had all our gear with us, and we flew like kind of like an airline. It looks like airline seats. And the people on the KC-10 knew where we were going, and they messed with us really, really bad. They said, okay, when we get there, you're going to have to totally mask up because we could be in the middle of a chemical attack. And of course, we're like, what? And so as soon as we get there and they open the door, they're like, gas, gas, gas. And we had to all stick our masks on. And then everybody on the ramp is laughing at us because there's no attack. And look at you idiots up there with your masks on. So that was our welcome to Bahrain.
Bahrain. Okay, so a lot of people have no idea where Bahrain is. Tell us geographically where that is and how it relates to Iraq and Kuwait.
Yeah, so in the Persian Gulf, there is a little tiny island, and it's kind of long and skinny, and it's connected to Saudi Arabia by a bridge, and it's not very long. It's right offshore, and that's Bahrain. And so when you come into the Gulf, it kind of hooks around at the bottom there, and you come in through the straits at the bottom, and then you go around that little hook, and there's Bahrain. And I would say we were probably, I think they said 400 nautical miles from the front, and the front is Kuwait. So that's how I'm judging that.
Did we have a military base there before Desert Shield, or was that like ad hoc?
Sheikh Issa was a Bahraini air base.
I'm sorry, what's the name of the air base?
Sheikh Issa, SHAIK, and then a space, capital ISA.
Okay.
So basically what that base constituted before we got there was a sewage treatment plant, a hard building for like their chow hall, which was tiny, a couple of hard concrete buildings that were their dorms. They had like a couple of those little half shell, like we call them HAZs, hardened aircraft shelters, look like a little half shell on the ground, and like one taxiway with like 3 of those. And they had F5s. That was their Air Force. F5s. F5 is basically a T-38 with a gun.
Yeah.
So it's not much of a fighter. Not much of a target either.
So this air base sounds rather small. Were you actually staying at the air base, or were you staying off base?
We stayed there. So we got there 2 weeks after George Air Force Base. So George Air Force Base went down first. And I don't know if they brought their own CE with them or if the CE came from some other base, but they had CE, which CE is civil engineering.
Okay.
They build things.
Yeah.
So their CE is called Prime Beef, and Prime Beef builds your airfield, your camp, your chow hall. They set bathrooms, showers, all that up. And then the other guys come in, and I'm going to look at my notes because I had to write notes. It's been a long time.
I get it.
Prime Beef did the aircraft revetments, and then shoot, I wrote it down and now I can't find it. There's another section of CE that builds the runways, and they do the triple R tile in the runways and taxiways, and they pave and make sure everything is good for a plane to land and take off. So they set all that stuff up for us. So when we got there 2 weeks after, they were still building everything, but our revetments were built by the time we got there.
How long did it take from the point you guys were alerted to the point you're in country? Talking weeks?
In
Couple
30
months?
years. I want to say at least a week.
Yeah.
It was
So
fast.
it's pretty damn quick. Yeah.
It was fast. My head was spinning because
Yeah.
1 minute I was at a wine fest and the next minute I was getting shots and on a plane.
You still had a hangover probably.
Yes, I had a big hangover.
All right. So civil engineers come in and where are you staying at? Are you like in GP mediums? Are you in buildings?
No, we had tents. So I don't know if you know what a Desert Eagle tent looks like. They're tan, canvas. They're nicer than the old like cloth canvas tents. They're more of a
Okay.
rubberized. They set a whole what we call tent city up there. And so every time a new unit would come in, they'd set up the number of tents they needed to house those people. So because we were female, we had to have our own tent. And we were on the end of a long row, and then they had to have a bathroom that was just for females, which in the beginning, that was kind of a problem because they were used to dealing with only men. The minute our squadron showed up, all the girls showed up because we had girls from our squadron. And then all of a sudden, George had girls come in, and there was a communication squadron that came in that had girls. So 60 girls, 20,000 guys. You still got to build us a bathroom.
Yeah. So this tent, you called it a Desert Eagle?
Desert Eagle.
Okay. And how big of a tent is this we're talking about?
We had 10 girls in it, and we each had like a cot space and then a space next to it that you could have stuck another cot on, but that was where you stood to get dressed and put your gear and stuff. So that's where I stayed for 8 months in that space. That was my go to sleep and hang out space.
So it's probably like the size of like an Army GP medium, maybe like the old canvas type.
Longer and skinnier than what you see on MASH.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the weather conditions there when you got there. A little bit different than Germany, I assume.
Much. We got there in what's like their kind of like their winter. It was getting colder at the time as we got into more like the fall. It does actually rain there occasionally, even though it is a desert, and it did rain there once. I had to actually trench around my tent, so the whole bottom of the tent was like water bedding.
Yeah.
It was hot. It was always hot until it got to that winter part. When it was hot out, it was really, really bad because you're in the middle of an ocean and it's hot and humid at the same time. And it honestly felt like I had a wet wool blanket over my mouth and I was trying to breathe through it. That's how thick and hard that like the air is just really hard to breathe.
Terrible.
You had to get used to it because you're there. The other thing is there's a lot of sand there. And so my teeth, I started noticing after a couple of months that my teeth were like, I'd cut my tongue on my teeth in the back and I'd be like, what the hell? And when I got back, the dentist said, yeah, you had sand in your teeth and the sand made your enamel flake off. So I was losing tooth enamel from the sand. Yeah,
Nice.
no joke.
So so you're there, you're in a large tent. What about other parts of your living conditions? Where were you eating at? Do they have is your unit self-sufficient, or do you have another unit that comes in for cooks and stuff like that? How does that work?
So the Air Force did send down a unit to set up the chow hall because the one that the Bahrainis had was, I mean, it wasn't going to serve 20,000 guys and 60 girls. So we went in there and we streamlined their chow hall, made it a little bit bigger. We also had a field kitchen on the flight line because while you're out working for 12 hours, you're not going to go back to the chow hall to eat. It takes too much time. So they had the field kitchen was done by the Army. It was a real group effort. We had Marines, Army, we had Seabees on our base, Navy Seabees, we had Air Force. There were nations from, I mean, Brits were there, Germans were there, everybody was there. So the chow hall was like an everybody place, and you could run into someone from all the other 28 nations that were in the coalition.
Mm-hmm.
So we ate really good.
So you're married at this point. How are you maintaining contact with your husband in Germany?
So they had phones. They had phones at first. There was like one phone on base and you could go and wait in line there. And then the Air Force smartened up and realized that morale was really important. So they made a phone trailer and they made this whole trailer and it was nothing but phones. It was insane to try and talk to somebody in it because you got 20 guys around you all talking at the same time. And you had to get a phone card. and you would buy the phone card and it would be like $20 worth or whatever. And you had to buy it with Bahraini dinar. So I had to go convert my money, get my Bahraini dinar, buy my phone card, go use it. When it ran out, it was like, bye, love you, click, it was gone. You know, you were done talking. So I was calling him through the phone trailer like once a week, but I was writing a lot of letters. Like this is back in when we used to write letters. So I wrote a ton of letters, and I also brought a tape recorder with me, and I would tape record letters and send them home to him. So we did pretty good on that.
You mentioned mail. Did you guys get any soldier mail?
We got tons of any service member mail. So I actually did duty in the big post office in Dhahran, which is in Saudi Arabia, because everybody had to go do like a day of duty over there. The mail pile in that hangar was so big, it went up to the ceiling. People were writing so many letters, and you would just go and grab a stack and then bring them out to the unit and just frisbee them to everybody, like open it, read it, and answer that person.
For somebody
who's awesome.
For somebody who's not aware, who's watching this, can you talk a little bit to how that program worked and what that was all about?
So you could write to any service member. It didn't matter, you know, if you could be a little kid and do it, you could be an old granny and do it. You could send things in the mail to us. Like I established relationships with 3 different people through this mail, and you could just pick it off the pile. And so for some people who weren't getting any mail, this is a real morale booster because now they can pen pal. And so it was basically pen paling. But I maintained contact with all of my any service member folks for years afterwards. And it really lifted me up. They used to send me sticks of gum in the envelope because it was flat and you could get away with that. And I would get a piece of gum and I'd be so happy because, you know, it's dusty and hot and I'm miserable. And it was a nice treat.
Yeah.
So,
so that definitely helped with morale.
Definitely.
It's sad they don't do that anymore.
No, you can. I mean, if you have a contact with a squadron and you want to do like a care package, it's doable, but you have to have somebody who knows.
Yeah.
You know, that knows the unit. Like right now, if you want to go out to Nellis and pick a squadron and say, who's deployed? Can I send them a package? You can do that. But right now, the technology and the supply lines are so good for our military. They really don't need us anymore.
Yeah.
Not in that sense. You know, like I couldn't get anything there. So I was asking for things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people were mailing them to me.
So you're in a foreign country. Did you work with the locals at all, the local military, or were you guys kind of just standalone doing your own thing?
We did not have a lot of contact with the Bahrainis. My supervisors might have, but really we were like our own boss, and they just got out of our way. Yeah, we went over and visited one time because they had a flat tire on one of the F5s. And I was like, oh, I can tell you, I know how to change that. I worked on 38s. So we went over and changed their tire for them. They didn't know how to change the tire.
Wow.
So you can give anybody a jet, but if you don't train them how to work on it, it's useless to them. And they were literally trying to drive this jet up the flight line on a flat nose tire. That's how you collapse a gear.
It makes you wonder how they're doing in Ukraine with all the weapon systems and everything we're sending over there, you know?
I hope they're better off than these guys were, because this was like, it was like watching the Keystone Cops.
Yeah.
Not to like offend any Bahraini people out there, but I'm sorry,
Yeah.
back in 89 and 90, it was Keystone Cops.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
All right. So fast forward a few weeks, few months, and things start getting hot over there. At some point, the United States and all our allies said, hey, enough's enough. If you're not out by a certain day, things are going to happen. What did you guys do to ramp up in preparation for that? And what was going through your head when you were realizing that you might actually be participating in a war?
So we were already shooting at stuff way before the kickoff. We took out their SAM sites long before January 17th. We weren't going to let them hurt or kill anybody. And so F-117s were in there before the news even knew there was a conflict, you know, and they went in and just took out like strategic targets and said, no, you're not gonna shoot at our guys. When our guys come over land at you, we're not gonna lose a bunch of guys. And so until like on the morning of the 17th, or was it the next day, the 18th, we came to work and all our jets were gone, like gone. And they can stay up for a long time because they can air refuel. And that's when we knew, we were like, oh, it's gone. It's on right now because everything's gone. So they didn't come back for hours and hours. And when they did, they were all empty. And that's when I knew, I was like, oh, it's real. This had just it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a really scary morning too, because we also lost a jet in the middle of all that. He had fog when something happened. He had an IFE, in-flight emergency. He needed to land. They were going to land him in Saudi Arabia, and it was really foggy. And he intersected the runway the first time, and the second time he didn't. He finally lined up on the runway, and when he did, I think his nose gear or something wouldn't come down, and he ended up bellying in and just stoved up the whole airplane. So that was scary, because my husband was like, that's my jet, because my husband was there by then. So
Oh, he was.
yeah, he came down 2 months after I did. So I got there in August and he got there in October.
Oh, okay.
I wish he was here. He's at a baseball game tonight. I kind of wanted to reschedule with you, and then I was like, nah, if Bill wants to talk to you, he will get with you.
Yeah, so yeah, we don't do joint interviews, but I would love to interview him on another one. So how did that work? You're still staying in a tent with the girls, I assume?
So he was in his tent with the guys across camp, and I was in my tent with the girls. And then one day a week, we got to go downtown and have our little R&R, and everybody got R&R. It wasn't just for us.
Yeah.
And you go downtown, and they had the downtown Bahrain is like, kind of like, how Dubai has that whole strip of touristy, nice hotel. That's downtown Bahrain in the 90s. So there was a really nice place down there, and we went down and rented a hotel room and had food and hung out with each other and other things. And yeah, that was good. I hadn't seen him in 2 months.
You have civilian clothes, or are you just going in?
Yes, we packed civilian clothes. And when I went down, so there was a shuttle that took all of us downtown, and you had to go down together and you had to come back together. And if you missed the shuttle, you were screwed, because there's no way back to the base. There's no taxi. You're walking.
No
and
Uber.
Now you're at the mercy of whoever's on the road, So I went downtown to start in civvies. I'm getting it confused, because we also went back after the war, and we went to Saudi and did mop-up operations. And then I had to wear my uniform downtown, because the Saudis are a little less progressive, and they don't like women to have any part of them uncovered. They don't want to see your face. They don't want to see wrists, nothing. So I was pretty demure about my dress. I bought some clothing that I thought would keep me out of trouble. And, I didn't veil up or anything, but I wore a dress that went from my neck to my ankles.
So, as military operations are starting, I'm assuming, excuse me, does your work shift change? I mean, are you working extra hours?
We were on 12s.
Okay.
12.
Gotcha.
12-hour shifts. Yep. All the time, from the time I got there till I left.
Were you guys in mop gear, or did you have mop gear, NBC type protective gear?
Had our mop gear, and I was never in it at work, but we did have to get in it during a Scud attack that happened in the middle of the night after the hostilities started. And that was not a fun night.
Tell me about that.
So I woke up on the floor, because the Scud that hit our camp hit a half a mile away, and it hit so hard, it knocked us out of bed. So I went from my cot to the floor, and I was still asleep. And then I hit the floor and woke up, and then you could hear alarm red, take cover. And so I slapped the mask on and grabbed my bag, but I never got my gear on, because we got into the shelter, and then they said alarm black. And then we were all crapping our pants, because we thought that was it. I watched people that night who are not smokers smoke, because they were that jittery about it. They all lit up, and they're sitting there trying to smoke and calm themselves down. And I started second guessing myself. Am I just hyperventilating because I'm scared? Did I accidentally get a little dose of whatever just possibly hit us? And it took forever for them to call an all clear, but they did finally call it. And then everybody was just complete adrenaline wash. It was awful.
And where did the missile strike?
It was about a half a mile from camp, and the crater was so big it would have took out any building. Any amount of tents that were in that vicinity would have been taken out. It blew a hole so deep that seawater was coming up through it.
So it didn't hit a structure. Did you guys have Patriots there?
We did. We had Patriot missile batteries, and we love those guys. We fed them. We brought them whatever they needed, because they're probably the reason why we are not dead. So they actually tried to shoot that one down, but there was an F-18 in the pattern trying to land, and they told the F-18, get out of here because we're trying to shoot this incoming missile, and he was in the way, and so they couldn't take the shot. Because
Gotcha.
it's a heat seeker, it's going to go right after the F-18. So that's probably why it hit camp.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So did you have any others that touched down, or was that it?
None that hit us. There was one that they hit a a barracks in Dahran, and a friend of ours, his brother was killed in that attack.
Was that the one with the National Guard guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Very sad, because I mean, when you're in an alarm red, you don't stay in the building, you go to your bunker,
Mhm.
you know. And I'm sorry to say, but they didn't really train us how to dig a bunker, and
Mhm.
our bunkers were crappy. One good missile strike and just the impact of that would have collapsed most of the bunkers they dug for us. So we didn't go in those. We went into like sandbags. We did like up to about, if you're sitting on the ground, about a sandbag row or two higher than your head if you were sitting cross-legged on the ground. And they didn't need to be tall. And then that way, if the walls did collapse, you could get out from under it. And then some people would put triple R tiles over the top. But again, that's a bad plan because it's heavy. And if it falls on you, now you have to get this panel off of you too. So we did low. And the guys that came from Reno Air National Guard, they had recce's, reconnaissance F4s. They told us, you don't need a big shelter. You just need to get behind something so shrapnel doesn't hit you. And when you do hear bombs exploding and stuff, plug your ears. That's what they told us. Because these guys were in Vietnam and they knew what to do. Nobody told us anything about what to do.
Mhm.
Nothing. So we were very ill prepared for that kind of stuff.
So you mentioned you had 12, excuse me, you had a 12-hour shift. What would be your routine day? What is exactly you'd be doing in the 12 hours?
I'm trying to remember the time frames. I'm gonna say 6 to 6, and I was on day shift at first, and then I flip-flopped over to nights. But we would get up at 6, go eat chow, jump the van to go to work, go out to the flight line, crew the jet all day, refuel, change tires, whatever it needed. And then the jet would take off and be gone for hours because they can air refuel. So they'd be gone for a long time. Maybe they'd come back before we went home, maybe they wouldn't. And then if it needed to be serviced again, we'd inspect it, service it, and get it ready for the next flight. Those jets were constantly gone.
And how many guys and girls are working on one jet? I mean, is this a big team or?
So I had my own jet and I was the crew chief. So I'm responsible for inspection, refuel, defuel, tires, brakes, any parts that need to be taken on or off, cleaning the windscreens, getting the pilot's cockpit ready for them, and then launch and recovery. So if that plane's going to leave, I'm the one out there marshaling, telling him to stop and all that. The weapons guys were their own little entity. They came in and did the load on the weapons. They'd safe the weapons if we needed to work on the jet. And then you have your specialists that do like, we call them spark chasers, the electricians. We had guys that worked on the radar, hydraulic specialists, engine guys, everything. I mean, yes, it's a team, but the person that's handling the entire jet is the crew chief.
Yeah, a lot of responsibility.
A lot, yeah.
Okay, so the war. Any other things that occur during the war? And then you mentioned you went to Saudi at one point. I'm trying to get a timeline here and how that worked.
Yeah, so we were there until I forget when they called it, we win and it's over. And then we were there until I stayed until like April of 90. And my husband didn't come home for another month or so. We were home for maybe 6 months. And then they said, okay, we're going to have to go back and do mop up. So just basically like taking the jets back to not Bahrain, but to Dahran and just patrolling, like air patrol, basically. And if a SAM popped up and it looked like it was going to do something bad, then we'd pop it. So we did that for 6 months after the war. So home for 6, I think we went back in like December or January of the following year. And then
and that was in Dahran,
which is in Saudi Arabia. And do you remember the Kobar Towers?
Is that Kobar? Yeah.
I stayed in Kobar Towers before that bombing occurred.
Yeah.
That's where I lived. That was a little spooky too. The Saudis didn't really like us.
Yeah, they still don't.
They don't, no.
So I was at Kobar Towers myself. Tell the people about what, I mean, it's a unique facility. Tell somebody listening to this what Kobar Towers is all about.
So Kobar Towers was built by the royal family for the Bedouins. They built it because they wanted the Bedouins to come out of the desert and live in a nice place to live. Well, Bedouins don't believe in living above another human being. And the Kobar Towers are a vertical apartment high rise. So they rejected the royal family's offer and said, no, thanks. We'll stay out in the desert with the those spiders, those crazy spiders that eat your
Camel
ear off.
spiders.
Yeah, gross. We'll stay out here with our camel spiders. So it was a nice little apartment. And of course, my husband and I went together because our options were I go first for 6, come home, he goes for 6. We don't see each other for a year. We begged. We were like, please, please, please don't do that to us. And they had seen how we worked together. So they knew that we weren't going to be stupid and kissy face all the time. And so they let us go together and we both went and they gave us an apartment. And then all the guys stayed in the same like tower. They were just in their own apartments, like 4 or 5 guys to an apartment or something like that. And that's where we lived for 6 months while we went out and worked our jets 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm. I'm not trying to put stories on you, but if I remember right, the plumbing there was unique. It couldn't handle toilet paper or something like that.
I don't remember that, but I'll tell you what plumbing was unique was there were no female bathrooms on the flight line on Bahrain. No, they don't have girl bathrooms because girls don't do that sort of thing. Their women have babies and take care of a house. So I could not go to the bathroom anywhere. There's no place for me to go unless I wanted to march into the guy's bathroom and see things. So I had to get my guys to escort me into the bathroom. And then I had to be like, head down, find the stall, do your business, get out. And then there are bomber holes. You know, you stand with your feet on either side of the hole and aim for the hole. And that is tricky.
Challenging.
And then you got guys yelling at you, get out of here, and calling you all these names. They didn't care. They didn't know me. So going to the bathroom was a real problem. Yeah.
So you mentioned in your email, and then you just reminded me. So let's go back to during the war. There were only 60 females amongst 20,000 guys. What are the challenges that come along with that?
Oh God.
Oh, by the way, in the 90s.
In the 90s, yeah. Okay, so do you remember Tailhook?
Yeah.
Okay, and here I am in Vegas now. Tailhook happened before I got to the Gulf War. So Tailhook had happened in like the late 80s. And we actually got briefed on it when we were still at Williams Air Force Base before I'd gotten to Germany. And it was basically like, has anybody ever harassed you, sexually harassed you, or, you know, done anything to you? And I was like, yeah, every damn day. So the people on the flight line at Williams were all warned, hey, don't mess with the girls, leave the girls alone. Because what they did to those girls during Tailhook was gross and disgusting. So we get to Bahrain and the war, and I'm looking around and there is nobody else who looks like me, because they're all boys. And I'm just like, hat down, collar up, you know? And I just tried to be as unobtrusive as I could be. Everyone knew I was a girl. My guys kind of rallied around me. They treated me like their little sister and protected me to the best that they could. But a lot of guys just wanted to talk to a girl. I know it sounds kind of weird, but we had an EOD contingent of EOD guys, explosive ordnance disposal guys on the base. And I had to walk by their tent every night to go to the bathroom. And every time I'd walk by, they'd be like, hi. And I'd just be like, I'm not talking to you, you know, and I'd just keep walking. I figured if I don't engage with them, then nothing will happen. About the 5th or 6th time I passed by that tent, one of the guys came out and he goes, come on, we just want to talk to a girl. And I was like, married. He goes, I know, you're married. That's fine. We just want to talk to a girl. We're not going to do anything to you. So I sat down and talked with them. They told me how much they miss their wives and their girlfriends. They asked me about my job. I asked them about we became friends. Those guys were the best. They would come on the flight line and check on me. Hey, do you need anything? We're going to the BX. You want anything? I'd be like, yes, I want some Oreos and some grape juice. And I had Oreos and grape juice. Like, those guys were amazing. There was a Scud attack one night. I was halfway to the bathroom. Alarm red goes off. I'm like, son of a, I'm way far from the shelter. So I dove into their tent because they had a shelter, all EOD. They had a shelter around their tent. And I'm on the floor. I got my mask on. Nobody can see. It's dark. And I'm like freaking out a little bit. And the guy goes, it's okay, buddy. And he's patting me on the shoulder because it's dark. He doesn't know it's me. The lights come on after the all clear. I pull my mask off, and he goes, damn it, she's been in here the whole time. But they would never have done anything to me. They were such good people. They risked their life every day, and especially when they went up to clear the airport in Kuwait. These guys risked their life quite a bit up there, and they brought back
Mhm.
a stack of pictures like this tall of just IEDs, body parts, boots with a foot hanging out of gross stuff. I was like, okay, that's enough. That's enough, guys. I don't need to see that. And they made their own jungle juice.
Oh, nice.
They got fruit from the chow hall and they put it in their tent. I don't know how sterile it was. And they fermented it until it became alcoholic, and then they drank it.
They're probably the most popular guys on base when they had that.
Oh, they also knew the scope trick too. You can get scope, dump the bottle out, put whiskey in it, put a drop of blue food coloring in, super glue the seal back on the bottle, pass it right by the customs guy.
Well done.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? I just need to be all on when the shit hits the fan. I don't really need to be drunk while that's happening. So no, thank you. I don't want any of your hooch.
That's good stuff. All right, so do 6 months in Saudi, and then where do you go from there?
We came home after that, and that's when they started decommissioning the F4s off of Spangdahlem, and we had A10s coming in by that time. And so we were kind of converting everything over to A10 stuff, and then they were giving people the option, like, do you want to stay and work the A10? Do you want to go with the F4s wherever they're going to go? And most of the F4s went back and got decommissioned in the boneyard at Davis-Monthan. So, you know, that wasn't a pathway for you career-wise. It was more go on the A10. And my husband ended up going on to the A10. I was on the A10 for about 18 months, and then I got out because I was trying to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
But we ended up going to McCord after that. McCord is in Washington, Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
And we worked there for 18 months, and then they closed that base. It seemed like everywhere we went, they were closing a base. This was during rollback times.
Yeah.
So everything was rollback, and you're getting people out left and right. And, you know, people are getting $20,000 severance checks to get out of the military. I took one of those.
So what year did you get out?
94.
So you did 10 years.
Yes. And it didn't get me a thing except for my $20,000 worth of severance pay, which they took 28% off the top. So
You didn't do the GI Bill?
yes, I did. That's how I got my my bachelor's of music education.
Gotcha.
So the GI Bill paid for about half of that, and then I paid the rest, and it took me 6 years to pay off my loans, but I paid off my loans. Very proud of that.
Yes, as you should be. So your husband, did he get out too at the same time?
He stayed in for 26,
Okay.
and he got out in 2011, and just out at Davis-Monthan. Oh my God, I have Davis-Monthan on the brain. We were there for 15 years. He's at Nellis. He got out at Nellis. I really want him to interview with you because he has great stories.
Yeah, I'd love to.
He's done a lot more awesome stuff than I have. He stood up a new squadron out at the base. He stood up Flanker AMU. They're the aggressor squadron that teaches the other pilots how to do the air-to-air.
Mm-hmm.
Really need to talk to him. Yeah.
Cool.
But he got out, and now he inspects F-15s in the phase dock as a civilian.
Oh, nice.
Good gig.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So let's do a couple follow-up questions. So you served your country for 10 years. What is it that you think that the military taught you to help you be successful later on in life?
Tenacity, strength, mental, intestinal fortitude. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with dress right dress. Okay, in basic training, they make you do this stupid exercise where you have to put your arm out to the side and look that way and then hold it. And it's to make your line straight and whatever. But for a TI, it's kind of like a torture. And our entire flight had to do dress right dress in 95-degree heat in Texas. And he said, if any of you drop your arm, even a millimeter, it's 15 more minutes. If you cry, it's 15 more minutes. And like, he just kept adding all the, if you do this, if you do this. And I'm in the front row going, I am moving nothing. And I held my arm for an hour in the hot, hot sun while girls behind me cried and made it longer and longer and longer for the rest of us. That taught me to be tough, mentally, physically, in every way that you can, because the only way we were getting out of it was to get through it, you know? And now I work in a job that you might not think is very tough, but if you've ever been in a school these days, you've heard anything about how teachers are being treated, it's a war zone. And I draw on everything I ever learned in the military to get through a day in my school. It's that bad.
If you had one of your students came up to you, they found out that you were a veteran and they said, hey, I'm thinking about joining the military when I turn 18, what advice would you give them on how to succeed in the service?
Well, I would tell them that is what you make out of it. So if you go in with a good attitude and you try as hard as you can to get through all the challenges they throw at you, you're going to come out a different and better person, because that's what happened to me. And your life will change in ways that you never even imagined. Because I mean, I came from a small town in Maine, and my choices were get married, have babies, or waitress. Now my choices are whatever I want. Teacher, mechanic, artist, musician, whatever I want, because I have that internal strength to say, I want this. I know I can start a process, go through it, get to the end point, and do that culminating event and earn what I want out of it. And I tell my kids all the time, you get what you earn. You work for it and earn it. It's not given.
Yeah. So we're recording this right now, as you know, and then in a few weeks you'll receive a copy of the video, and you'll also be given instructions on how you can submit the video to the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, where theoretically your video will live there for theoretically hundreds of years. So your great grandkids might stumble upon the video one day. What would you want them to know about your service to your country?
It was worth it. Every moment, even the hard stuff was worth it. I'm so proud to have been able to take this little person that I didn't think was worth anything and be able to do something so important as defend our land, our country, our values, and just go out and make a change in the world. And everybody thinks, oh, I can't do anything. You can do something really, really small with a bunch of other people, and it becomes something really, really big. And that's something that everybody needs to understand, that bigger picture. And I put myself into that bigger picture as one tiny little pixel, and look what happened. So that's what I would want them to know.
Well said. Is there anything else that you wanted to capture?
I think I don't know. I struggled all day to find. I have pictures upon pictures sitting on the floor. I've been looking at it,
Yeah.
trying to remember stuff. Ugh.
So once we're done with the interview, I'm gonna turn the recording off, and then some admin stuff I want to talk to you about, including the photographs. So with that, I want to thank you for spending time with us today. And more importantly, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
For having me.